So welcome. This presentation is a facilitated discussion about contracted management services and child nutrition programs. This is hosted by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. My name is Jessica Vasinski, and I am a child nutrition specialist with ODE. My fellow presenters will be Chris Fascia. He is the coordinator for USDA Foods, and Chris Davison, who is also a child nutrition specialist with the school team. We have Davison DeSanchez, who is the manager of the school team, and she will be on answering questions at the end of the presentation. So some of you may be wondering why ODE CNP has decided to hold a webinar at this time. There are always great reasons to bring sponsors and food service management company contracts together. First, many of the sponsors that are currently contracting with the food service management company are school food authorities, and often they sponsor multiple child nutrition programs. Each of the child nutrition programs administered through ODE CNP have varying regulations and requirements pertaining to contracted services. This is often the reason we receive requests for clarification of the roles and responsibilities of sponsors versus those of contractors. In addition, in recent years, findings have increased in areas for which regulation clearly defines the responsible party. With mounting questions and requests, ODE CNP has decided to provide an opportunity to define the roles and responsibilities that USDA has detailed in regulation, and also offer space for conversation surrounding those responsibilities. Keeping that in mind, the objectives for this webinar are to present the definition of food service management company from each of the federal child nutrition programs, provide some clarity around the responsibilities of the sponsor versus those of the FSMC, offer best practices for building a successful program partnership, and allow space for questions and discussion. For each child nutrition program, the definition of food service management company varies slightly. The most important thing to remember is that the sponsor and the food service management company must follow the regulation specific to the program they're working within. To offer a quick example of the differences in regulations, we can look at the definition of a food service management company. For national school lunch and school breakfast programs, an FSMC is a commercial enterprise or a nonprofit organization that is or may be contracted by the sponsor to manage any aspect of the school food service. This is per 7 CFR 210.2. For the summer food service program, an FSMC is any commercial enterprise or nonprofit organization with which a sponsor may contract for preparing unitized meals with or without milk for use in the program, or for managing a sponsor's food service operations in accordance with limitations set forth in 7 CFR 225.15. And for the child and adult care food program, an FSMC is an organization other than a public or private nonprofit school with which an institution may contract for preparing and, unless otherwise provided for, delivering meals with or without milk for use in the program, as it says in 7 CFR 226.2. And finally, in USDA Foods, food service management company means a commercial enterprise, nonprofit organization, or public institution that is or may be contracted with by a recipient agency to manage any aspect of a recipient agency's food service in accordance with 7 CFR Part 210, 225, or 226, or with respect to charitable institutions in accordance with this part. To the extent that such management includes the use of donated foods, the food service management company is subject to the applicable requirements in this part. However, a school food authority participating in NSLP that performs such functions is not considered a food service management company. Also, a commercial enterprise that uses donated foods to prepare meals at a commercial facility or to perform other activities that meet the definition of processing in this section is considered a processor. All this can be found in 7 CFR 250.2. So that is a lot, but one final piece that we'd like to define is the term program sponsor, or just sponsor. This is a term that Oregon uses specifically when speaking of a school food authority, a local education agency, or a non or for-profit organization that signs and holds agreements with ODE CMP to operate child nutrition programs. You'll hear us refer to sponsors throughout the presentation, and when we do, we're referring to the organization that holds that agreement with ODE to operate the nutrition program. When an organization decides that they'd like to operate any of the child nutrition programs, they must enter into an agreement with ODE CMP. This agreement lays out the overall federal and state requirements of the sponsor. The agreement is made directly between the state and the sponsor, making the sponsor the ultimate responsible party for ensuring that all requirements of the agreement are met. Sponsors that have signed an agreement with the state may then decide that they would like to contract out pieces of the food service requirements to another organization, a food service management company. Because the USDA has regulations pertaining to contracting food services, the sponsor must follow the appropriate federal procurement requirements and use the state agency contract template. In addition, the procurement documentation, contract, and resulting award of the contract must be reviewed and approved by the state. It is not, however, the state agency's responsibility to manage either the overall procurement process or the FSMC contract. The state agency is responsible for administering and monitoring the adherence to the agreement signed by the sponsor, and the sponsor is responsible for monitoring and ensuring adherence to the agreement signed by the food service management company. But what is the overall breakdown of responsibilities when it comes to the everyday operation of child nutrition programs? Federal regulations provide an answer. So let's review the sponsor's responsibilities. As a reminder, this is a broad overview of the responsibilities found in regulations. If a sponsor or FSMC has a question as to their responsibilities within a child nutrition program, they should reference the specific program regulations to ensure they have the most accurate and detailed information. First, the sponsor needs to employ a qualified staff person with experience in managing child nutrition programs to monitor the FSMC contract. This person is often the main contact for the state and is the person that is placed in the food program coordinator or program manager position in CMP Web. Some of you may ask why this person needs experience in child nutrition programs if the sponsor is contracting out the food service management. The clear answer is that child nutrition programs are much more than just food service, and the overall management of the program may not be contracted out. Therefore, knowledge and experience of the programs is essential to ensure that regulations are being met. Ultimately, the administrative and financial responsibilities remain with the sponsor, as does the signature authority. The sponsor is required to submit the claim for reimbursement to the state, collect and maintain all backup documentation for those claims, ensure health and safety certifications are completed at sponsor sites, and set meal prices and charging policies. The sponsor must understand the program in order to manage the distribution and certification of free and reduced priced applications, process yearly verification of applications, handle appeal hearings, and ensure confidentiality of all eligibility determinations. The sponsor must also set up and monitor a menu advisory committee to assist with menu planning, making sure that there are diverse voices on that committee, including parents, staff, and students. The The sponsor must manage and ensure that all staff with program-related duties meet training requirements for each child nutrition program. And believe me, every program has different requirements. Sponsors are responsible for approving special diets for students when medically necessary. This could be through the use of a medical accommodations form or 504 plans or IEPs. And when programs are reviewed and findings with corrective action are given, the sponsor must implement internal controls to ensure that the findings are resolved and corrective action completed. In addition to overall management of the program, the sponsor is responsible for oversight of the food service management company's adherence to the contract and program requirements. This is done through the following: monitoring visits of program sites. Each program has different regulations surrounding the number and kind of site monitoring that must occur, but it's the sponsor's responsibility to conduct these visits and complete the necessary forms. Reviewing menus and ensuring that they meet program meal pattern requirements, as well as examining meals for acceptability and wholesomeness. Reviewing the monthly FSMC invoice, comparing that invoice to the contracted terms, as well as primary source documentation, such as meal counts and menus. We want to make sure that all FSMC staff have also met program training requirements and maintain all documentation of the program for 3 years plus the current year. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Fascia to talk about USDA Foods. Chris?
Thank you, Jessica. Can you hear me okay this time?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm pretty excited about this training. We've been wanting to do something like this for quite a while, so I think it's really good for everyone. So I'm the USDA Foods Program Administrator for the state. I manage the entire USDA Foods program and all the programs underneath it. I'm just going to talk about this slide real quick. General management and oversight of the USDA Foods program can never be delegated to a food service management company. The sponsor is responsible for ensuring that the entire allotment for the year has been spent on any or all of the 4 USDA Foods programs. The sponsor should coordinate the ordering in consultation with the menu planner for the food service management company. The 4 USDA Foods programs are direct delivery, diversion processing, USDA DoD Fresh, and the unprocessed fruit and vegetable pilot. The sponsor is also responsible for ensuring that USDA foods are used only to benefit children and that the FSMC has basic measures in place to safeguard USDA foods. Examples could include inventory control, theft control measures, etc. The sponsor must reconcile at least annually the FSMC USDA Foods value credited on the client invoice against ODE USDA Foods records. The required crediting frequency is based on the agreement between the sponsor and the FSMC, but is typically monthly. Sponsors must ensure that they are financially benefiting from USDA Foods. Because Oregon doesn't allow anything other than fixed price per meal contracts, USDA Foods must be tracked for proper crediting. Let's look at an example. A case of USDA Foods direct delivery peaches are $24. This is what the FSMC would have to credit the sponsor. However, the FSMC can purchase a similar cases of peaches from their broadline distributor for $20. The FSMC could gain $4 for not using the USDA Foods peaches, and the sponsor could lose if USDA Foods funds were not spent on other products. Between the 4 USDA Foods program, there are literally thousands of fresh, frozen, and dry products available, and even some locally produced items, so there really is no reason for the funds to not be fully utilized. It is imperative that sponsor contacts are maintained in the USDA Foods ordering system, along with any FSMC staff that have been delegated ordering privileges. ODE currently uses the federal WebSEM system rather than its own system at the current moment. ODE provides general oversight of the USDA Foods program as is tasked by USDA to enforce program regulations. If ODE discovers that an FSMC is deficient in USDA Foods program regulations, it will reach out to the sponsor for technical assistance or corrective action. So with that, Jessica, I'm finished with my slide.
Great, thank you, Chris. And we'll pass it to Chris Davison, who will talk about FSMC responsibilities. Chris?
Thanks, Jessica. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, welcome all. My name is Chris Davison. I am a child nutrition specialist here on the school team. And I'm going to talk to you about FSMC responsibilities. So since this is a partnership, food service management companies also has the responsibility as dictated by contract and federal regulations. First, the FSMC will provide qualified management professionals with experience and understanding to manage the food service operations and supervise employees of those operations. But what does that overall management piece look like? It means preparing and serving high quality, wholesome meals that meet USDA meal pattern requirements in order to ensure that those meals may be claimed for reimbursement. It means ensuring that all products meet Buy American requirements for NSLP, SBP, Special Milk Program, and USDA Foods. And it also means maintaining health certifications for any facilities not covered by the sponsor. On a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, the food service management company is responsible to adhering to the 21-day cycle menu agreed upon during contracting and running any changes of the menu by the sponsor for approval. Of course, through service of meals to participants, the FSMC is required to maintain confidentiality of participant eligibility status, submit meal counts with supporting documentation to the sponsor on a monthly basis, as well as gross cash receipts for paid meals, a la carte, and other sales. The FSMC should work closely with families and the sponsor to accommodate special diet requests to ensure that participant needs are met, and representatives from the FSMC are encouraged to participate in the menu advisory committee created by the sponsor. Of course, to create and maintain a well-run food service operation, the FSMC has a responsibility to direct and supervise food service employees, ensuring that staff are trained and meet the requirements of the child nutrition program in which they participate. This includes working with the sponsor on policies and procedures to meet program requirements. In addition, in cooperation with the sponsor, the FSMC provides an ongoing nutrition awareness and education to program participants. Finally, just as the sponsor is required to maintain documentation, so is the FSMC. The documentation must be maintained for at least 3 years plus the current year and made available upon request during an administrative review or audit. And I think I'm going to pass it back over to Chris Fascia to talk about FSMC responsibilities and USDA Foods.
All right, thanks, Chris. So earlier we talked about sponsor responsibilities with regards to USDA Foods. So the requirements for FSMCs are very similar. The FSMC should work in coordination with the sponsor to ensure all USDA Foods and talent funds are spent on any or all of the 4 USDA Foods programs. The FSMC should coordinate the ordering in consultation with the sponsor. The 4 food programs are once again, I mentioned earlier, direct delivery, diversion processing, USDA DoD Fresh, and the unprocessed fruit and vegetable pilot. Like Jessica and Chris mentioned earlier, this is a partnership, so you're supposed to be working together on what the needs are for the sponsor. Use all the sponsors USDA Foods that have been ordered in their child nutrition programs and ensure proper crediting value based on the ODE USDA published values. Comply with all regulatory requirements as outlined in regulations and USDA Policy Directive Memos FD 80 and FD 110. Those directives cover crediting, inventory, and safeguarding requirements. In fact, I refer folks to those all the time, and the links are actually on these slides. So when you're getting hands on these slides, you'll be able to link directly to those, or you can always email me, and I'd be happy to send them to you. Finally, in fixed price for milk contracts, all costs are included in fixed price. Because ODE takes USDA Foods service delivery fees away from the monthly sponsored claims for reimbursement, these fees should be reimbursed back to the sponsor. It should be noted that all revenue received, whether it be through food sales or reimbursement grants, such as the child nutrition programs, farm to school programs, or fresh fruit and vegetable programs, they must all go to the sponsor and the nonprofit food service account. All right, Chris, that's it for me.
Thanks, Chris. All right, let's talk a little bit about the flow of communication. Clear and constant flow of communication is important for ensuring success in the child nutrition program. To understand how communication flows from ODE, CNP, and to whom, let's first look at CNP Web and the roles for each program. For SFSP and CACFP, the four main contacts, the authorized representative, food program coordinator, business manager or financial contact, and the claim contact are all required to be employees of the sponsor and will manage the sponsor responsibilities of the programs that we discussed earlier. The main contact for the programs will be the food program coordinator. This is the individual that should have experience and knowledge of child nutrition programs, and it will definitely be the individual that should provide communications to and receive communications from the FSMC contact. The food service management contact is listed separately and is often the food service director. The sponsor staff in CNP Web will have view and edit access to the system. The FSMC staff listed in the CNP Web will have view only access to the system. For NSLP and other school nutrition programs, CNP Web is laid out differently. The executive contact, CNP program manager, and business manager or claim contact are all required to be employees of the sponsor and again will manage the sponsor responsibilities. The key contact for school programs is the program manager, and just as was mentioned for the food program coordinator, this should be the person with understanding and experience in the child nutrition programs. The FSMC contact is listed in the nutrition services contact, again, often the food service director. For all programs, it is critical that CNP Web is up to date at all times. If a sponsor has a staffing change in any of the key contacts listed in CNP Web, sponsors must contact their child nutrition specialist as soon as the change occurs to update information in the system and gain user authorization for new sponsor staff taking over child nutrition program responsibilities. These new staff will be required to complete training to get up to speed on child nutrition program requirements and to ensure that there is no interruptions in program service or meal reimbursements. In addition, sponsor staff needing user access in CNP Web must submit a user authorization form. User access to the system is specific to each individual, and user names and passwords may not be shared with other sponsor or FSMC staff. Now, when discussing communications sent from ODE CNP, we can look at topic areas. Though there are some variances between programs, the general rule of communication from ODE to sponsoring program is as follows. When dealing with any of the areas that concern administrative or financial management of programs, ODE CNP always communicate directly with the food program coordinator or program manager. In some instances, particularly around agreements and administrative reviews, the authorized representatives or executive contact may be included. When claims or financial questions are involved, the claim contact may be included. ODE CNP includes the food service management contact and communications that include food service operations. This will often include administrative review, memos, newsletters, training information, and Q&As. While it is simple to define the contractual and federal responsibilities of sponsor and the FSMC in a presentation, ODE CNP recognizes that in practice, day-to-day operations, those duties and activities and responsibilities can become intertwined, overlapping, and indistinct. Because federal regulations do require specific and distinct roles, ensuring that certain actions or duties are performed by sponsor versus the food service management company, it is extremely important that the agreement between the sponsor and the FSMC be seen as a partnership. The state agency takes the role of communicator and compliance officer, communicating the regulations of each child nutrition program, detailing the policies that must be met and requirements for meeting those policies, and ultimately reviewing programs to ensure that there is compliance of those policies. When policies are not met, the state agency issues corrective action and technical assistance to aid programs in coming back into compliance. As two pieces to one program, the sponsor and the FSMC must work together in partnership to ensure that policies are met and that there is compliance with federal regulations. ODE CNP has seen the greatest success with this when there is constant communication between the sponsor and the FSMC. While ODE provides specific pieces of information to both sponsor and FSMC contacts, there are instances based on regulation of certain programs when information must go directly to the sponsor, and the sponsor must then ensure that that information is shared with the FSMC. When the flow of communication between the sponsor and the FSMC stops or breaks down, there is a greater instance of findings on an administrative review. Let's take a look at what we've learned today. First, we reviewed the different definitions of an FSMC in a variety of child nutrition programs. Next, we looked at types of entities that could be a sponsor in the child nutrition program and who can enter into an agreement with ODE CNP. Then we discussed the requirements that sponsors has to complete when they wish to contract out pieces of the food service to an FSMC. We also outlined the responsibilities of sponsors and the FSMC for the CNP and USDA Foods program. Then we provided some clarification on how information flows from ODE CNP to sponsors and when FSMCs would be included in that communication. Lastly, we discussed the importance of developing strong partnerships that include a solid line of communication between the sponsor and the FSMC. Jessica, I'm going to pass it back over to you for questions, concerns, and ideas.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and other Chris, both for all the information. So now we'd like to open it up for our Q&A portion. So if you do have questions about the presentation, about the roles of the sponsor and food service management company when it comes to child nutrition, please go ahead and type those questions into the chat. As I mentioned, Dee Sanchez Damasita is here. She's the manager of our school team, and she will be answering any questions that come up about the programs.
With one caveat, I'll answer questions I can. I also will. If it's about USDA Foods, Chris Fascia is definitely the expert there, and so you have a team of people who will try to answer questions.
Absolutely. So we always work as a team. So we're happy to answer any questions that we can. We are going to be gathering the questions and answers to compile them and potentially provide a Q&A document. I did see some questions in the beginning about the slides, so thanks for those questions. Yes, we can provide the slides. As I mentioned before we started, if you were on, we're actually moving to a new form of learning. It will take us a while to move there, but We will have a workday learning system, and it will allow sponsors and those that need to take trainings to do it in this online system. And so for some, we are newly piloting it with this FSMC training. So for those that weren't able to join us live today, we will send them a link to the workday training. I know if you have USDA Foods, potentially you've already experienced workday because Chris did provide a training through that program for USDA Foods. If you're on today, we'll make sure that you get the slides as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is actually a good question, and I'll throw it out to Dee. So Dee, in the presentation, we do talk about the flow of communication. The FSMCs, as we say, will have access to newsletters, trainings, etc. But some have found it's difficult for them to find out about those things if they're not one of the program contacts in CMP Web. Is there a way for them to learn about trainings, webinars, etc., that maybe they're not aware of? So Dee, take it away.
Absolutely. So we have each of our programs, actually, SFSP, CACFP, and SNP, which is school nutrition programs for NSLP and school breakfast, and also for our seamless summer option, which has become much more prevalent since COVID. We have newsletters, we have program newsletters, and the traditional way that those are distributed is using those key contacts out of CNP Web. However, we also have the ability to choose to get those newsletters. And so there is a link on our page. It's also on my email, and I can send that out, where you can opt in, sign up for the listserv to be able to get those. And so we can include that information to you with the I believe we send a thank you after attending this webinar. Is that correct, Jessica?
That is correct.
Okay, and so we will send the information, we will include in that email that all of you will get how to sign up for those newsletter distributions. And that is the primary way that we communicate.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dee. We are all learning new systems here at ODE for communication and training. Lots of fun. Okay, this is going to be for Chris Fascia. Chris, I receive emails regularly regarding USDA Foods, though they've contracted with an FSMC. Am I the responsible party to purchase USDA Foods, or would that be the FSMC?
Yeah, so that would be outlined in your, first of all, thank you, Jessica. Second of all, that would be outlined in your contract. So if you delegated USDA Foods ordering rights to your FSMC, it should be stated as such in your contract. And I know Richard Williams has that in the boilerplate ODE template. So you need to check your contract. Most FSMCs do order on your behalf, but that doesn't take away the responsibility of that joint partnership we were talking about. Because maybe you don't want certain foods ordered, or you do want certain foods ordered. You're supposed to work, and they're supposed to work in consultation with you as the sponsor. And in WebSEM, if we do maintain a separate, contact list in there and users, if we've seen just an FSMC employee listed in there, I've been having staff reach out to the district and add a district contact. That way you're always getting the USDA Foods emails, bulletins, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully I answered your question. If not, go ahead and enter it in the chat.
Great, thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And I know that Richard is on with us today, and there's a second part to that question, Richard. And I think if you are able to unmute, I'm going to ask this of you. If a sponsor recently lost a contract with an FSMC and are trying to work out a contract with a school district for nutrition services, it's not currently completed, but will it affect their renewal? And
Yeah.
Richard, oh, there you go. Go ahead, Richard. What'd you say?
Yes, that will affect their renewal. So their food service management contract has to be reviewed and approved. So I can put the information in the CMP web to complete the renewal process.
Okay, and then if they've just ended that contract with the food service management, it sounds like they're trying to now contract with a school district. Should they be connecting with you as well?
Yeah, I would recommend that they reach out to me so we can clarify and make sure that they're set up for success and able to renew during the renewal period.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. Okay. Well, this is a great question. I'll send it to Dee. How have things changed from 2 years ago when many of the sponsors had FSMCs before? And it might be a question for also sponsors as well, if you want to add your thoughts to the chat, but I'll throw it out to Dee for now.
I appreciate, first of all, thank you, Jessica. Chris reminded me of my manners. I appreciate you saying that. I believe this is definitely one of the areas where sponsors would be able to say what is different. In terms of the regulations around food service management companies, Richard could definitely answer that better than I could. I can tell you in terms of how we've been operating since COVID, that we are operating a different program by and large, that most schools are operating either summer food service program, which is coming to an end. The waiver to be able to operate summer food service during the school year ends whenever your traditional school year starts. And then seamless summer option is what is available for schools for this year. The relationship between the school staff and the FSMC staff, I would say, if anything, again, not getting into the regulatory changes that may have occurred, but throughout COVID, we have definitely seen that a strong relationship between the food service management company and the school district itself, the administration. There have been so many changes that bringing all of those problem solvers together is where we see the most success.
Absolutely, great. Richard, did you want to talk to any of the regulations and how they may have changed with FSMCs and sponsors? Anything new out there?
Yeah, there are no changes with the regulations. The only thing we are seeing is due to COVID and the public emergency that currently exists, USDA has given a waiver for people to extend beyond the 4th renewal year for an additional year. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of program sponsors, if they decide that they're going to go from self-ops to contract with a food service management company, in some cases due to COVID and the emergency, they may end up using a non-competitive procurement under 2 CFR 200-320C. Just keep in mind, if you do a non-competitive, that you don't have the option for renewal years, and you would have to reach out to me to get all the contract documents, and I'll walk you through that if somebody was interested in doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. If you are interested, or if you are renewing, if you have an FSMC contract and have questions about it, Richard is definitely your guy to go to for understanding all of the regulations and policies surrounding procurement and contracting. So thank you, Richard, for that. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions so far. It looks like, oh, we've got one more. Oh, okay. So here's a question for the crowd. If anybody is aware of an organization that operates as an FSMC in the Eugene area, Dawn is interested in knowing. So throw that out to the peanut gallery, as it were. Also, Chris Fascia has put the link to subscribe to the USDA Foods newsletter if you're interested. I believe Dee also put a link to subscribe to the school nutrition newsletter if you're interested. If you have other questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat. Again, we're going to gather these questions to make sure that we've answered them all and potentially provide them as a Q&A document if that's important. But otherwise, Dee, is there anything else you wanted to share?
I always want to share how much I appreciate the people who are working in the child nutrition program. Every day, all day. I think COVID has shown us how much we are capable of. It has been a bit of a stretch and it has been a bit of a surprise, to be honest with you, how long we have had to do this. It is a challenge to navigate and understand all of the implications. I am very pleased with how much we are aware of people working together, trying to come up with the best solutions and keeping feeding children at the forefront of what they are doing. We are very much aware that it is not getting easier to navigate the challenges and concerns that our program is trying to meet. And so I guess I will just say that as we are hearing from school districts about their potential plans to get started for the new school year, it is good that we know we have the whole year to operate a single program. I'm really thrilled that USDA is offering the higher reimbursement rate for Seamless Summer for the whole year. All children can eat at no charge, and you will be reimbursed at a higher rate than ever before for the whole year. I think that is a recognition of how much work and effort goes into delivering meals for our students. I do want to say to remember that whenever we make a decision in school administration, that we want to remember that the child nutrition program's goal is to get access to those meals to as many children as possible. And there are a lot of concerns going on out there right now, but for school nutrition, for the child nutrition programs, it is to feed every child we possibly can.
Absolutely.
For everything you do to try to make that happen.
Thank you, Dee. Appreciate it very much. Sean, we will take care of you. Don't worry about that. I was asking for some help with renewal, so I'm sure you'll be contacted. As far as the recording for this presentation, we will see if we can get that out to y'all, if the Q&A's conversation is what you're trying to hear. Let's see. I believe that is it. So of course, as Dee said, we want to thank you all for being on the webinar today. If you are renewing for CACFP or NSLP and are a sponsor contracting with an FSMC, this has taken care of your requirement for that annual training. But again, as we get the recordings and get the information, we will make sure to get that out to you. On behalf of all of us, we thank you so much for everything you do, as Dee said, and we hope you have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.